Hey, this is Tom. Welcome back to MVP Chess, where we're continuing our series Bobby Fischer, Play the Najdorf Sicilian. In this video, we're going to look at the variation where white plays 6h3. So before we jump in, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Really appreciate your support. And also check out my channel on Twitch, MVP_chess. You can see below, trying to get up to 50 followers, so would really appreciate your support there as well. Okay, so 6h3 is a move that we have to treat with some respect, mainly because it's a very trendy move, but also from Fischer's perspective, he actually used it with the white pieces to defeat none other than Miguel Najdorf, the opening's namesake. So let's jump in. We have e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, open Sicilian. Of course, we capture, and after knight takes, we attack the pawn on e4, forcing knight c3, and then we play a6. And in this position, white plays the move h3. White's kind of arguing, well, you made a little pawn move on the side of the board. I can do the same. Well, these pawn moves aren't really created equal. You know, you can think of this pawn move a6 as one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, right? I mean, this is preparing e5 and is extremely strategic in nature and has much more to do with center control than playing on the wing. So that's one thing we need to recognize with a6. With h3, not so much. It's kind of caveman chess, right? White's tried everything under the sun to crack the Najdorf. It can't be done. White is trying to play h3 to prepare g4, to prepare a wing attack. It really doesn't have much to do with center control the way a6 does. Okay. So, how did Fischer respond to this move h3? He played the surprising move g6. Now, you're going to say, Tom, what the hell are you talking about? In your last video on 6 bishop e3, when we covered the English attack, you went on this whole tangent about why the Najdorf is better than the dragon, because the Najdorf doesn't give black a hook to attack on the king side the way that the dragon does. And here you're suggesting we play g6 and follow Fischer. I am. And there's one huge difference in this position. That is the move h3. Okay? Fischer feels justified taking this into, call it like a Dragendorf type position, because white has essentially lost a tempo with this move h3. Okay, in a normal dragon setup, white wants to play h2, h4 in one move. And that changes things significantly, right? Often in a dragon variation, where you have opposite sides castling, the game can be decided by a single tempo. You know, so if white is playing this variation down a tempo, then it's something that black can seriously consider. And besides, Fischer, who's also a huge proponent of the king's Indian defense against 1d4, he felt very at home with the king side fianchetto. So that's why I think he opted for this line. So after g4, okay, white continues pressing on the king side. Bishop g7, g5. Okay, this is already a mistake in my opinion. Notice Fischer's opponent, Damjanovic, is a little bit lower rated, 2273, still master strength, but I really don't like this move g5. Okay, so Fischer responds like we saw in the English attack with this really instructive move, knight h5. Actually used this in one of my own games fairly recently on my Twitch stream, and got the idea from Fischer. He just throws the knight into h5 and plugs the h file and just slows down white's attack on the king side. So the other reason I don't like g5 is if you are going to get a kingside attack against this dragon structure, which white is clearly trying to do, you need to trade off these dark squared bishops. Okay? Because this dark squared bishop is a very good defender of the king side. Okay? It can not only be a fire-breathing dragon supporting black's attack, but it's a very good defender of the king side, especially the h8 square. So if you're going to launch an attack, have any hopes of checkmating your opponent, these bishops have to come off the board. How are you going to do that after g5? You know, I really think Fischer was trying to provoke this move, and black just fell for it. So after bishop e2, let's pause videos here. Okay, we don't want black to take on h5, obviously, and win a pawn and open the h file. So how did Fischer respond to the move bishop b2 in this position? Pause your videos. Okay, this knight, one of the other drawbacks of g4, g5 is that this f4 square is very weak. Fischer would like to plant the knight there, actually. Okay, so he starts off with the really nice move e5, our classic Najdorf move. Okay, and after knight b3, he sinks the knight into f4. Going back, white cannot take here, because after e takes d4, white's got two pieces hanging and would be losing. So the knight is driven back, and then we throw the knight into f4. Of course, in these positions, there is no way white can play bishop takes f4. I don't even care if he wins the f4 pawn in the long run. An unopposed dragon bishop on the long diagonal, I mean, forget about it. So white plays bishop g4. Fischer maintains the tension with knight c6. He would love white to capture on c8 so he can develop his rook to the critical c file in the Najdorf. And white throws in the knight to d5, and Fischer simply castles. Again, knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, b2's hanging, but most importantly, this bishop has become really, really active. You could maybe take a quick timeout here to play knight e5, just blocking the attack on the d6 pawn, and black's got a really, really nice position, mainly because of this really strong bishop bearing down on white's king side, and white's king's going to have a really difficult time finding shelter. So white presses on with h4, and now and only now Fischer captures on g4, okay? He wouldn't have wanted to do it in this position, for instance, because then white can play h takes g4 and open up the h file. So once h takes g4 is no longer a possibility, then Fischer exchanges. He needs to sort out his queenside development. You know, he was trying to provoke white into taking on c8 and developing his rook, but white's wise to that plan. But now the king is a little bit misplaced, the queen rather, and black can take on d5 without white being able to capture there. So now after knight e7, black's accomplished a little strategic goal here. He took on d5, and white was unable to capture with a piece. So now this weak square on d5 is occupied a pawn, and black doesn't have to worry about it. And now black also has a pawn to attack, a weakness that white has to protect. So white defends with queen e4, and Fischer brings the rook to c8. That's where you want your rook in the Najdorf and in most Sicilians, on this half-open c file, putting pressure on the king side. So white realizes, I need to castle ASAP, plays bishop b3, and after b5, gets his king castled to the queen side. Okay, but black is really the one with the initiative here, okay? mainly because white's attack on the king side has really stalled out with this move g5. It's really difficult to generate any sort of meaningful attack when this dark squared bishop is still on the board. It's such a good defensive piece. That's why in the Yugoslav attack against the dragon, and you can look up this variation, white is often playing bishop e3, queen d2, and then playing the bishop into h6 to trade it off. Can't do that here because of the pawn on g5. So Fischer plays rook c4. Boom. Really nice move. Starting concrete operations on the c file and kicking the queen back. And then queen c7. Preparing to bring the other rook into the game. Starting minority attack, and black's attack is looking very strong. White tries to repel the rook with knight d2. I think white noticed, hey, Fischer's rook's really short on squares here. Maybe I can win the exchange. But Bobby had an ace up his sleeve in this position. So, over to you. Black to play. What did Fischer play in this position? Pause your videos. So, in this position, the rook is attacked, but Fischer played a nice intermezzo e4. Really, really, really nice move. Okay? Even at the cost of a pawn, it doesn't matter. Fischer is trying to open up this dark squared bishop and generate an attack on the queen side. Okay, so that was a really instructive move. White decides to defend with queen b3. And after rook a4, king b1. This is always an important move for white to play in the open Sicilian when castle queen side's on the board. The king always stands better on b1, protecting the a2 pawn and coming off the c file. So that's always a tempo that white has to consider in all of these positions. So Fischer goes on the attack, knight f5. The knight here on e7 wasn't doing much, so Fischer looks to improve his worst placed piece, knight f5, good move. Also threatening to come into the d4 square, so white blocks that with c3. And then Fischer gets his last piece into the game, rook c8. I love the simplicity of Fischer's games. You know, he plays so energetically, but with such clarity, just like Capablanca. You know, this is why I love analyzing his games. It's not like analyzing one of Magnus Carlsen's games. I got absolutely no idea what's going on in those games. But I really understand Fischer's play, and that's why he's just a really great master to look at for opening analysis and model games. Okay, rook c1. Black has got a lot of pressure on the c file, so white's looking just to reinforce that point. Black steps off. We have a3. White's really trying to prevent black from playing b4 and to open things up. We have bishop e5, h5. So black's trying to get something going on the white's trying to get something to go on the king side, but in this position it's just too little, too late. And now that white is kind of tied down on the queen side, defending various threats, Fischer drops the knight back to e7, and now he's targeting this rather weak pawn on d5. We have an exchange. Notice how nice of a defensive piece this bishop is. Okay. Even if you had a queen on the h file and you played queen h7, right, and the king's dropped back to f8, you have no follow-up because of this bishop. That's the strength of this dark squared bishop, and why white absolutely needs to get it off the board to attack. That's why I just hate this move g5. It's just such a bad move. Okay, then we have c4, which I really don't understand. I really don't understand this. You know, white's playing on the side of the board in which Fischer is attacking. He's potentially opening up lines to his king but I really don't understand this play from white. But But I think it has more to do with the fact that white just has absolutely no counterplay on the king side. Like, what move do you play here? I think c4 is with an eye towards maybe the endgame, trying to get queens off the board or something like that. Fischer sidesteps. We have c takes b5, an exchange of rooks, and then in this position, I'm going to turn it over to you. Black to play. What did Fischer play in this position? Pause your videos. Okay, as I mentioned in my other videos on the Najdorf, okay, as a Najdorf player, you have to be constantly aware and constantly evaluate what the endgame will look like. Because in so many positions, black is just better in the endgames. Normally because white is so desperate to generate an attack that he overextends his pawns and weakens himself. And Fischer sees that. He says, look at this pawn on d5. Look at this pawn on g5. These are real weaknesses in the endgame that I can exploit. So Fischer pivots here, okay? When I was first looking at this game, I was really expecting like a capture on b5. Keep queens on the board. You know, we got open files to work with and just attack. But no, Fischer plays queen takes b5, which is just a really instructive move. And we have this capture. And like I said, this pawn's hanging. This pawn on g5 is very weak. Black's king is perfectly safe. And black, you know, still has attacking chances on the queen side with b4. So I really like Fischer's decision here. You know, white was, I think, a little too desperate to get queens off the board and didn't take time to properly evaluate the endgame. So white tries to get active, rook c7. This is like his first active move that he's played almost all game. So Fischer takes off this weak pawn on d5 with a gain of tempo. And black's idea is to get behind this potentially dangerous pawn on b5. But Fischer just plays bishop f4. He just plays bishop f4. You know, I think he's willing to even give this pawn up. He wants to get rid of this g5 pawn so that his king can easily come into the game, break this blockade, and get his central pass pawns rolling. So white exchanges and takes on b5, but boom, d5. Here we go. This is what I'm talking about. So Fischer saw, okay, I'll give up the b5 pawn. Your pawns are like an eon away from promoting. It would also critically weaken your king. Meanwhile, you still have this weakness on g5, and I've broken this blockade, and I've got these central pawns that are just going to ram down your throat. After knight b3, king f8, Fischer begins to centralize his king. Knight c5, rook a7, the rook drops back and just nicely guards the 7th rank. a4, white tries to push his own pass pawns, but it's just too little too late. So over to you. Black to play in this position. What did Fischer play to take advantage of white's pawn weaknesses in this endgame? Pause your videos. So congratulations for spotting the move knight h3. Again, this is the reason why Fischer just liquidated into this endgame. He just saw pawn weaknesses everywhere that he could easily exploit, and here he is putting this plan into effect. White continues to push because what else do you do? And Fischer takes on f2. This is the pawn you want to take first. We don't want to take on g5 right now. Let's take on f2, so now these pawns become not only passed, but connected, okay? And watch how Fischer just steamrolls these pawns down the middle of the board. After a6, rook's blockading the a7 square, e3, rook b8, king g7, king finds security on the g7 square, no problem. Rook e8, trying to attack the pawns from behind, and d4. I mean, how are you going to stop these pawns? They just can't be stopped. And after knight b3, d3, white just resigned in this position because because there's just, oops, sorry about that. There's just really nothing to do in this position. These pawns are just gonna come steaming through, and there's really nothing that white can do about it. So going back, I think this is a really interesting way to meet 6h3 in the Najdorf. This was a variation that I was completely unaware of before analyzing Fischer's games and looking into this line more seriously. I had typically just played e5 and myself had won some pretty decent games, including some important games over the board with that. But I really like this plan with g6. It's just basically saying to white, I'm going to play a dragon, you're a tempo down. That tempo is going to cost you big time. Big time. And it did in this game. And I would say that this move g5, let's go ahead and give that a double question mark blunder, okay? Obviously, the computer wouldn't view it as that, but I do. I really think after g5, Fischer probably looked over at his opponent and said, "You're dead lost. You're just dead lost." And I agree with him. After knight h5, bishop e2, e5, knight b3, knight f4, you have no way of trading off these bishops. Your kingside play has been ground to a halt, and black is just going to have a feeding frenzy on the queen side, and that's what happened. And you know, it doesn't have to always play out to mate in the Najdorf. Like I said in the English attack video, you're going to get plenty of mates playing the Najdorf, but you always have to be on the lookout for a way to transpose favorably into an endgame. And always look out for those pawn weaknesses. When white's got pawns on d5, right? Like after he threw the knight into d5 and has an overextended pawn in g5, you can always keep this idea in the back of your mind. Because it's very difficult for a white player who's being attacked, who's on the back foot the whole game and is trying to defend, is to be able to pivot and evaluate what the position will look like in endgame. Normally, they're really desperate to parry your attack and try to get queens off the board. And very often will accomplish that goal, but then look at the position and find, uh-oh, I'm dead lost. This endgame's losing for me. I've had that many times with both colors, really. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And the next time you get, you Najdorf players, the next time you get 6h3 on the board, give g6 a go and let me know how you fared in this line. Okay, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.